So, the top 10 body language mistakes, a lot of these were nonverbal. Think about what we talked about with the debates, right? The debates and the nonverbal. Has anybody watched any of the Supreme Court justice hearings? Anybody watched some of that? I feel the same way about some of the nonverbal stuff. Some of it's still verbal, but think about this as an interview, right? It's an interview. It's a hearing, but it's an interview. Now, some of these guys, they still aren't interviewing, right? They're not really posing questions. But that is probably a stressful interview for anybody. It doesn't matter, it's just now, but other times for a Supreme Court justice, right? They're in front of this, they're on TV, they're on national TV. Did anybody actually see the one time, and we've told you to do this in an interview, if you know you're going to be nervous or whatever, you could have, a notebook or something to take notes on, or you could have your resume to look at. Did anybody see when they asked her what she was looking at? And she held it up, and it was just a blank notebook, just a notepad. It was for her to take notes. She hadn't taken any notes, but she has gotten everything off the top of her head. She sounds very intelligent, but it's a play of gotcha. And this is any interview. You got to be prepared because they're going to ask you a lot of questions, and you got to be ready to go. And you don't know what they're going to ask half the time. So when we look at these top 10 things again, think about your generation. Look at number 1 again, failing to make eye contact. How many of you know or have done this? You've texted or messaged somebody who was in the same room as you or even sitting next to you like on a couch. Right? You guys are used to doing that. How many of you and your own parents have done it back and forth in the house for stuff too? Right? So we do this as communication now more than looking each other straight in the eye to make that communication stuff. Okay? And so that's something different because in an interview, you can't do that. You're sitting across from them, or even in that Zoom, there's eye contact that'd be made. Right? That's going to be the tougher part too in the Zoom. Because who's done you guys have all done Zoom, right? With the computers right there. And like at home, I use a camera as well. But you got to know where that camera is. You got to know where you're looking. Your facial expression's there, playing with something. I've talked in here about people kick my desk. They kick me under the desk. And they don't realize it. Mr. Malloy walked by earlier today. He had a great one that I totally tease him about. We were in a parent-teacher conference. There was like 6 teachers with one parent. We were like in a U shape with a parent down at the open part, right? He was talking. I was sitting next to him. He literally bends over while he's talking to the parent without looking down. He kept looking at the parent talking. Untied his left shoe, then tied it again. Untied his right shoe, and then tied it again. And sat back up and just kept talking. When we were done, I asked him, why did you untie your shoes and tie them again? He goes, I didn't do that. I'm like, yeah, you did. No, I don't remember doing that at all. So we have habits that we don't even know sometimes what we're doing, and we did that. So you need to kind of figure that out for yourself on how that may be. I had a student once, and this was on purpose, but he knew he was going to sweat. He said when he got nervous, he sweats a lot. Instead of just calmly wiping the sweat away, because it was literally dripping, okay? It was dripping. But he could have just wiped away. Like, it's already obvious. I already see it. Instead, he would wait till I'd look down to write something, and he'd have his hands at his side, and he'd go. That's more obvious. I can see you in my peripheral vision, and you're making noise now, and slapping yourself. Okay? That one he knew he was doing. Now, one that somebody didn't know they were doing, and I had to say something. I had a young lady once that was gulping air. Okay, have you ever gulped air? Where you feel like your throat expand a little bit, like you're almost choking on air? She was so nervous, she gulped air, and so what I would see, it looked like an Adam apple going from under her chin all the way down to her open part of the neck and back up. Because she'd swallow air and gulp, and her whole neck would go up and down with the air. And she just kept doing it. So now, what am I doing? When somebody's doing something that's different, what do? You focus on it. You're like, oh my gosh, did I really see that? Is that what's happening? I'm going to see if that happened. It happened again. I'm not even hardly paying attention to her at that moment. I'm just watching the thing that I've never seen before. And so I had to tell her at the end, we got to find a way to get you to not be so nervous or not gulp air, like, and swallow really big. You know, it's almost like trying to get rid of the hiccups. So we've got to know what we do and how we do that. I had another person interviewed in this building one time. They're not in this building, so don't try to guess who because they're not here. They were getting so excited. They were sitting on the edge of their chair, and they started rocking while they're talking. And they just kept doing this stuff. Well, part of it was he wanted to tell us about a teepee that he owned and how he'd get the kids excited and bring the teepee to sporting events. That really didn't help when we're asking you questions about teaching in the classroom. That might be something you add on at the end, but not your main focus, and then not start doing the whole. Anybody ever see Chris Farley in Saturday Night Live skits? He does a lot of that stuff. He rocks and does the motion, and that's the thing. You got to know what stands out when you're doing these things. Or who's ever had a bad handshake with somebody? Either sweaty palms, or you grab the fingers, or they grab your fingers and don't get the whole hand in there, right? Sometimes we got to look at how that happens. So sometimes we're just nervous, we're uncomfortable. So when we talk about this stuff, you have to make sure that while you're there in the interview, as well as what you hopefully did on the resume and the cover letter to get the job, you have to show them that you want to work there. They want to know, because we're going to talk a little bit about all those links I provided that you should be looking through. Did you all look online? You saw I put a review packet. This time it's not a grade, because trying to make a review packet out of this one would be actually just the test, and so I'm not going to double the test. But you have to look at the stuff, and most of those companies make comments in those links that I provide, those PowerPoints, that say you have to show them why you want to work for them. Not why you want to get a job, not that you need the money. Why did you apply to us? Why do you want to work here? It's a very big deal. So make everything geared toward them in the interview and a resume, even if you got to change a few words. Express why you want to work for them. This is why you got to ask questions. We're already talking about overdressing. So on those documents, when you click on them, and this is what you should be going through, because I will put stuff from the test from these documents. The one that says fun, odd questions, they will sometimes ask odd questions that you say, this has nothing to do with the job. Why will they ask this? That one, it could be, why is a manhole cover round? There are logical answers. Anybody got one off the top of their head as an answer? Is why is a manhole cover round? It can't fall in. Anything round, because there's an edge, it could not fall in if it was tipped up, where a square rectangular one could be shifted to an angle to do that. Anybody got another answer? It's very heavy, so what could you do with it? You could roll it. Yeah, there's different answers about that. Another one could be there's no edges to catch something on the way up or down because it's got smooth edges. How many golf balls fit in a school bus? They do not want you to just guess and say 1,000,000, 500,000. They want you to show them how you would solve it. Now, it doesn't mean that you'll totally solve it correctly, but they want to know what you would do. You might go, well, a golf ball is about 2 inches. I could probably get 24 of them across. I might be able to get, 30 high, and I could do 200 of them lengthwise. And I'd multiply that together. That would be a way of you showing them how to solve the question. That's what they want to know. They want to know that you can solve it. Because one of the other odd ones, if you were 2 inches tall and put in a blender, how would you save yourself? There are some logical answers. Doesn't mean it's got to be totally true or not, but it's just something that's there. One of the companies on the list here to look at, one of the things they do, they have a question ball with odd questions, and that's the first question of the interview. You sit down at the table, they literally toss you this ball, and the ball is about yay big, and they say, what's the question right in front of you? That's the first question of the interview. It's to not make it normal as in, hi, who are you and why are you here? It's to be different. The next link on there about interview do's and don'ts, there's a whole lot of things on there. We've talked about some of that stuff already, but go through that. One of them that stood out right away, I had a student that would have had a perfect interview, did a great job, but they were chewing gum during the interview. When you're face to face with somebody, that's just chomping then, right? It's what you're going to see. How many of you know chompers on gum? Right? They're making the noise, they're just chewing. But make sure you always know. So there's a lot of good do's and don'ts tips off of that sheet. And then the one now we say about info from companies. One of the first links is John Deere. So when I talked to John Deere, I talked to the head of human resources. She's been in human resources at John Deere for over 30 years. I got connected with her because one of my high school best friends is one of their head of security, cybersecurity, in charge of all like their badges and stuff for swiping. She talks about wanting to know things, no fluff, streamline it. She likes Eagle Scouts, meaning she already knows what you do, what you've done. It means something. She talks about overdressing, having people skills, don't be too wordy. You know, when they say don't be too wordy, it's also don't use words that you probably wouldn't use normally. If you've listened to any of the Senate hearings, I think some of those senators try to use words that they've never used before. And then they repeat them over and over and over again. And I'm like, yeah, you probably don't talk like that very often. Now you're throwing it out because you want to sound good because you're on this Senate committee hearing. And they all do it. They all do it because they're getting TV time. They all want to sound important. So this is why I said when I call people, I talk to them about what do they do? What are they there for? There's another document on why your resume gets tossed again. Things don't add up. Keywords are overused. It looks too fancy. Never lie. There was actually a Notre Dame football coach. This is probably 10 years, 20 years ago. The guy got hired and was fired 24 hours later. Kind of weird. You think they had done their investigative work? Within 24 hours, they found out that he lied on his resume about his first coaching or teaching job, and they said if you're willing to lie on your resume, we figure you'll lie about other stuff, so you're already fired. So never lie on that stuff. Always make sure that you're open and honest about things, or just don't say things. Then there's the slide that's just got tons of documents on it, and these are all PowerPoint presentations of companies that I have visited. Walgreens. I went to their headquarters. Anybody know where their headquarters is? It is around here. It's in off of 294, like on your way to Great America. Okay? It's up that direction. And so I got to visit and talk to the head of their human resources up there. One of the things that they brought up was you never know how many people are interviewing for a job. To be hired at Walgreens, like in Sandwich, you're applying here if you're going to just work retail. It's a simple job. The managers there can do that. The thing is, though, the managers and the pharmacists are hired by the headquarters. They get over 100,000 resumes and applications a year to be a manager or pharmacist at a Walgreens. Do they have time to look at all 100,000? Not a chance. So when they start to scan through them, this is again, whether it's online or in person or whatever else, the mistakes stand out. They see a mistake on a resume. It could be punctuation. It could be spelling. If they're looking for those things, they'll just toss that one out already. They'll say, we need perfection on this because you've had time to proof it. You could have somebody else proof it. You could have done, you get to take your time. It's not like an interview where you might mistakenly say something. This should be perfect. So you've got to be good on those. That's probably the number one thing that I heard them say about it. And then most studies show that the average HR person looks at a resume only from maybe 5 to 20 seconds. before they decide to look at it more or throw it away or delete it. So Walgreens is kind of that, and then, I got to hear him talk about marketing and stuff. And then you got a PowerPoint from Men's Warehouse on how to dress. Now, just because it says Men's Warehouse doesn't mean that they don't have slides about ladies and how to dress. So there's lots of stuff in there about how to dress, things that they could wear, how to dress. Part of it is, again, knowing what goes with what. I'll ask you some simple questions. For a guy's dress shirt, what are the two most common colors? Say them out loud. Blue is one of them. There's a different one that's number one, though. White. Just white. How about tie colors? Two most common colors. Red is one of them. Not black. What's every politician, every newscaster have on 50 to 75%? Blue. Red and blue. Okay? What? Now this one's tricky. Here, I'm telling you up front, it's a trick question. What is the number one color of men's dress shoe that should be worn? You're all going to think brown or black. It is not gray. Brown or black is the answer, but let's see which one's right. Thumbs up if you think it's black. Thumbs down if you think it's brown. Thumbs up black. Thumbs down brown. Thumbs down brown is the answer. Because brown is what you're even supposed to wear with what color that most people wear black. What color, like suit, needs to be with brown shoes? The blue, the navy. Now, if you're going to a funeral and you only had navy and no black, wear the black shoes. But for dressing up, brown shoes is the most common one for that. But if they're wearing black or gray, they're going to wear the black shoes. So again, but this is what people look for. When I said, guys, it's simple, but if you dressed incorrectly or you had a different color belt than shoes, they would notice that. Where ladies, again, we said all those different things that you could wear, right? All those things that, you might think, how do they look? How do they match? People are going to do that stuff. Whether you like to be judged or not, they're judging you. The third one is from Google. I visited Google here in Chicago. Their Midwest headquarters is here in Chicago. I found out some interesting things. We got to interview a panel of employees. During the interview, though, when we got to ask questions, I noticed that the other 5 people kept looking at the lady at the end of their panel, the 6th person. We figured out what it was as we kept asking questions, because she finally said one of the things that you will always find out about a Google employee is on their name badges, and I don't know if they still do it, but they did at the time, it had a number on it. That number was what number employee you were hired as at Google. Right now, they'd be in the tens of thousands, right? Just it'd be a huge number. You might have the 50,000 or 100,000 on your badge. Imagine you're one of the top 100 people, though, and you have a number below 100. If you're walking around Google and you run into that person, you know, even without knowing who they are, that they're a higher up person or been with them the longest. And that's what we discovered in that interview, is that the lady there was like numbers somewhere between 60 and 70. She was an important person. Otherwise, you would have no clue. They were just answering questions. And that was something that was different about them. And one of the main questions in there that I asked when I said, what do you want my students to know about Google? Or what do you want them to know even if they try to get a job? And the answer was, keep reminding them that the world is bigger than their school or town. Because where is Google? Literally everywhere, right? Anywhere there's internet access, that's where they are. So to them, you can never do the thing, oh, this is sandwich or whatever else it is. I had to delete a comment the other day. I've got alumni that have been commenting on my pictures that I've posted about asking them to send me the pictures of what they're doing. And somebody made a comment of one of the alum, not one of the ones on the wall, but they said, oh, isn't this great? Look at what wonderful occupations. This is an alum saying, look at what the wonderful, great things people are doing. That, being from sandwich, And then another alum says, well, maybe it's just in spite of them being from Sandwich. You can tell the difference of one that, whether they like Sandwich or not, had a positive comment to make, and the other one had a very negative comment. Of course, when I looked at what they're doing right now in life, I found out the one person has been unemployed and cannot find a job. So in their head, they're struggling. And what are they blaming it on? Sandwich School, they're blaming it from being on Sandwich. Yet they have an architectural degree. They have a degree. And they can't get hired. I don't think, after going to college and getting an architectural degree, that Sandwich is the reason you can't get a job when you don't live here. They live in another state even. That is not the reason. So it's interesting to think that way, or what goes on, and that's going to come across in an interview. I can remember an alum coming to me asking me for help on an interview because they couldn't get a job. And we sat and did a practice interview. And then I, again being the bold Mr. Johnson, had asked them where they'd interviewed. So I called one of the people they interviewed with for a job, for a teaching job. Told them who I was. Told them that the person was a former student of mine, that they'd come in for some help. And I said, could you just tell me, without, you don't have to sound negative or positive or anything on that, but what stood out about them in the interview? What was it that you can remember? And they said, honestly, the main thing that I remember is they did not appear to be very confident in anything they told me. It doesn't mean then that they had wrong answers. But if they didn't sound confident in answers in an interview, they were probably hesitant to hire them for a job, because then they'd wonder if they would be confident in doing the job, that they were doing the job correctly. That's what I can assume. The next one, it's a Blue Magnet Interactive Group. That one is a company that does what we call SEO, search engine optimization. They are a company whose job is to get your company on page 1 of a Google search. They're the company that I told you says if you don't dress up and you come in for an interview, they tell you the interview's already over, thanks for showing up and goodbye, and you don't even get to interview. Yet they dress casually at work, unless they're meeting with a client, and they say to dress up. But they expect a lot of them. One of the most interesting things on their PowerPoint is they talked about they prefer females to males. They think females care about their job more than males. And yet the two owners of the company are males. And yet they're very much on the opposite side of who they hire, because of who they think did better on the job with the job that they need them to do. And then the one that everybody likes to read and hear about is the one that's called Red Frog. Red Frog is an event company. I believe that they are now out of business. They lasted a while. I visited them in 2011 and then talked to them again in 2014, I think it was, because I was checking on some stuff. But they're kind of like those mud races and obstacle races and stuff like that. They were a company people like doing stuff for. Anybody ever see the movie Bubble Boy? They had these shiny, happy people I brought up. That's what they were like there, this company. Trying to be very pleasant and happy. They had free food and drink a lot during the day. You could stay later at night and get free food if you worked extra. They had free candy all over the place. You know, they tried to decorate the place pretty nicely and do things differently there. Somewhere along the line, they must have overspent, or the revenue was not coming in, whatever it is, something must have happened. But that's the thing about businesses. You've got to keep money in. One of the oddest things I saw there, everybody was in their 20s or 30s. I felt like I was everybody's dad when I was visiting. And then I spotted one woman in her 60s. So being again who I am, I'm raising my hand. And I say, yeah, I got a question. This one lady here stands out because she's at least 30 years older than everybody else that works here. What's up with that? And they're like, oh yeah, she's like the mom. I'm like, what do you mean she's like the mom? Well, she actually was the mom of one of the employees, But being that they're all in their 20s or 30s, they said we felt we needed to hire an older person who would make sure that we all stay on task throughout the day. And that was her job. She literally just walked around all day throughout their offices and made sure that when they were taking breaks or talking or hanging out, they just didn't do it too long. That they stayed on task and kept getting their job done. I'd like that job. That'd be a nice job. Just make sure everybody else does their job. When she's not a manager or in charge, she just gets to kind of be the mom, move people along, get things done. But that's why you got to study these companies. What's good or bad about them? What things do you like about them? What goes on there? All right, to see if you're paying attention, answer the nearpod question of what were one of those companies and what was something I said about them? And when you go through those PowerPoints, guys, it's not, they don't take that long. The PowerPoints are very short. They're they're the notes that I took while I was doing that stuff. I've visited one of the top ad companies in Chicago. I've visited one of the top accounting firms. I like to visit. I've gone to a distribution center for Hyundai here in Aurora. You know, I go to different places. I talk to those people because I want to know what they think. That's why I like talking to businesses. I've talked to people in restaurants when I've overheard conversations about them owning or running a business. And then I'm like, oh, excuse me, well, I try to find out. But I also want to make sure when I find out stuff, it's legit stuff. So, like, I was at the accounting firm, and we were sitting around this conference table, and to impress us as teachers, they brought in this young guy. He was only like 30 or 31. And he comes in, he's telling us about the job and what he does. And then, because he wanted to sound really good, he was bragging that his clients, he had two big clients here in Chicago, United Airlines and the Chicago Bears. Well, off the top of my head, I'm thinking, how did a young guy at a company like this, within 5 to 10 years, get two of the biggest companies in Chicago? What question do you think I asked him? I didn't ask him how he got those clients. I asked a different question. Anybody have an idea? What did we say about networking? What did we say about how you're going to hear about your first job? Who's it usually from? Family or friends. So I asked him, who do you know? And he's like, what do you mean? I go, who do you know at this company? Nothing against you. You might be a great accountant. But at this young of an age, I want to know how you got these companies over people that might have been here 20 and 30 years. He goes, well, I do have to be honest. My dad's on the board of directors. His dad used to be an accountant at the firm as one of the top partners in the company and is now on the board of directors. He's one of the most important people at the company. I can't use that as an example of how to get a good job because he got the job because of his dad. That does not show me anything about telling you guys how to become a partner or get one of the best companies or do something at a company by working your butt off. That's what I wanted to know, because if the guy's story was, hey, it's because I went out and got additional business and I went and did this and this, that'd be a great story. But when your dad gets you the job, and it was probably his dad's clients that he probably got to take over his dad's clients. That's not as impressive. It's okay. I don't have anything against that. We call that nepotism. Have you all heard of that? It just means that it's like working in a family business. You got the job because your parents gave it to you. Or it's a friend thing. It's okay to do that, but don't act like it hasn't. So we got Red Frog, Blue Magnet, Men's Warehouse, Walgreens, Google. Okay? So look through those things and make sure you're doing that. So here's one. These are questions they can't ask you. In an interview, if they ask you this, you don't want to get like all mad or defensive, because then that probably just tell them, they'll just probably say, oh, okay, never mind. But then they probably won't look fondly upon you. But they cannot ask you about seeing a doctor or a therapist, about mental health. They cannot ask you about kids. Though, ladies, if you are pregnant, that could affect how they think about you. So it's always a dangerous position to be in, because they can look at it two ways. If they think you're pregnant, they're thinking, if I hire you, are you going to almost immediately do what? Go on leave. I'm going to hire you to pay you. You're going to give you insurance and pay for your insurance, and now you're going to leave already. You're going to take 3 months off. Now, the positives of you having kids could be stable. If your kids are in school, they might think you're not going to move much. We got a steady person. The negative of that could be kids get sick, you call in sick. Kids have activities, you got to get home. You can't stay late at work. The reverse. You're single. All right, they can work late. They don't have other responsibilities. We can get them to do almost anything we want. The negative side is you are single. You're not held down. You could up and leave. You could move anytime you want, pretty much. You're probably renting and not owning property. So there's pros and cons to all of it, but they're not allowed to ask specific questions about it. They can't ask about medical history specifically. They can't ask about religion specifically. And they can't ask about ethnicity or country, like where you're from specifically. Now, I keep saying specifically, because there are legal questions they can ask that can get these answers out of you. Because just like anytime you're in a conversation with somebody, what do we all like talking about usually? When I tape this stuff, the people are probably like, why is there can I not hear anybody? Why is it so quiet? What do we all like talking about? Ourselves. That's what we're normally going to talk about, ourselves with something, right? We bring up stuff. So the whole thing is to get you to start talking. So what I want you right now to do, what do you think are potential questions that could be asked that are legal, but I could get that other information out of you? What might I ask to get questions out of you, to get answers out of you, but I can't ask the direct question? This one's always tough. I'll kind of keep talking for the people in the recording so they know there's not too much dead air. So we're looking at, this is slide 47 for the people at home. Let's see. So people are you could ask about addresses, because we're going to fill that out in the application, aren't we? So we could start asking you about, oh, how long have you lived there? Have you always lived there? We might offer up where else we've lived or where else we've come from. We might. Any allergies we need to know about? Now, I couldn't ask specifically about allergies, but how could I rephrase that question? There is a way to ask that. We'll see if we get to it here. I can't ask if you already have kids. Ooh, speak other languages. I could ask that. I could ask that. That'd be a good one. I can't ask if you're married, because that's a family question. But there's a way to get that out of you. You can ask if somebody's a U.S. citizen legally, though, if they have a green card, because certain jobs you'd have to, right? That's even on applications. By the way, what's the number one question people think you can't ask, but you can, and it's on the application? No, they cannot ask that. No, they cannot. No, they are not supposed to ask that at all. Even then, you're not supposed to ask. The closest they can come is like a school could ask you if you want to mark it off, because then what they might do is ask if you want to be paired up with people in the dorm that are of the same, I guess not because of the Supreme Court justice, we want to say sexual orientation or preferences or whatever else. But yeah, no, that's a no-no. But there are schools that put it on for college because they do have scholarships and grants that have been applied now that are for different things that are LGBTQ. So that's why some of them will ask for dorm information though. But it's always got to be volunteer. They can't ask it out front. It's your age. They can ask age. Because certain jobs you got to be 16, some 18, some 21. You ever see somebody at a grocery store that they can't handle the liquor going across, the alcohol, right? They got to call somebody that's 21 over to run it across the scanner. There's always jobs that, so we can ask how old are you at least 21. Ooh, how do you manage time? There's a way I could get around stuff. I could ask you, what do you do in your spare time? You might talk about we work weekends. Would weekends be trouble? What's the one day of the week everybody would be paranoid about? Sunday. I can't ask you about going to church, but I could ask you if you can work on Sunday. What two major companies aren't open on Sunday? What? That'd be government. All government shut down. And one of the weird ones, there's actually laws. That's why you don't see new car sales on Sundays. It's always been there, but there's two major places. One is a restaurant, Chick-fil-A, and what's the rival of Michael's craft stores? Hobby Lobby. You never have to work on a Sunday if you work for those companies. They're closed on Sundays. So they'll never ask you that question anyway. They wouldn't care. What do you value? Ooh, what do you value? Wouldn't a lot of people bring up family? We just talked about that. You can ask about where they traveled. Have you traveled places? Because a lot of people, if they were from another country, might bring up that they traveled to visit family in another country. There's the medication one. That's the way we could ask medication. So like the allergies, are you on any medications that could affect this job? Or I could phrase it, is there anything we need to know that could affect you and how you do your job? If you're operating any equipment, you'd have to tell them. Some jobs require you got to lift like 70 pounds minimum. Or maximum, I should say, I guess. Some like driving a forklift or driving a truck or driving a van or whatever else. Like you couldn't try to hide having seizures. Because if you had one on the job, not only did you create liability, but they could fire you for lying that there was something that would prevent you from doing your job properly, or something we need to know to make sure that you are okay on the job at all times. I can't ask if you go to church, though. What if I had a picture? Think about it, if you've never been in this class before, and I had a picture here of a woman and a picture of some dogs. What would some people always do or eventually do? They'd ask. You'd ask, oh, is that your wife? I mean, it'd be logical to think that, but you'd probably ask, is that your wife? Oh, yeah, this is my wife. These are my dogs. And I could just say then, because you just asked me a question, what do I get to do? I can just go, oh, do you got any pictures? What are people in today's day and age going to do if somebody asks if you have pictures? They're going to pull out their phone and show them some pictures of family or pets. You know as well as I do, people love taking pictures of their pets and family anyway, right? They've got them, they're going to show them off. They're going to do that. So I don't have to really worry too much about that, but I can find that stuff. Okay? But if you get people talking, they'll talk. If you don't believe me, one of the easiest ones I've ever had about doing that, and it's strange stuff that happens, but you may be amazed when I said people just start talking. I had somebody sitting here one time, and I said, if you could go back in time, what would you like to have different about your life, or what would you change or want to experience again? Even if you don't want to change your life, what would you want to experience again? They literally were sitting there, guys, it just blew my mind. It was a shock in an interview. They went, I wish I could go back 4 years ago where my dad was my dad and not my mom. I'm like, what? And they went, Yeah, my dad had a sex change. Even went to Asia and had the whole thing with everything changed to be a female, and he wants me to call him mom. He's my dad. Wow. That's probably not something you should bring up in an interview. I mean, at the end of the interview, what are you going to remember? That. I'm not going to necessarily remember as much about you as you just told me about your dad having a sex change and you don't like having to call him mom. Or, I had another young man here. Who's your role model? My dad. Why is your dad your role model? Because as an illegal immigrant, it's been great to see how he's bought property and being able to be successful while he's here. What word should he have never said to me out loud? Illegal. You don't go around telling people you're an illegal immigrant applying for a job. You could have just said, I'm proud of my dad because he's bought apartment complexes and property and he rents them out and he's been very successful and I want to be like it. You didn't have to throw out anything else. But if that's a normal job, are they going to touch anybody that says that? Not even close. They're not. So you got to know, sometimes you just start to feel comfortable because you're just talking about things and then you blurt out something. And you don't even realize what you said probably. You probably don't even know that it could be a big deal. You guys can go ahead and log out. So that's why we got to think about what we're going to say in an interview. So we'll be finishing up next week when we come back.